So hi everyone, and welcome back to Yesterday Today Sewing, where I take the fashions of years past and get inspired and adapt them for my current everyday wardrobe. Now recently I have been quite inspired by the 1930s. It was a great time for fashion. 20s were not really my thing, with the very straight lines, de-emphasis on the waist. Doesn't suit me. But by the 30s, they were starting to move more into that sleek, waist emphasizing fashion, with still longer skirts, often bias cut, beautifully flowing, and interesting details. I think that's what I've always liked about the 1930s. So I've been doing a little bit of research. If you've watched some of my earlier videos, I've been doing a few undergarments, some slips that will work nicely under my 1930s clothes. So now it's time, I think, to make a dress. So I've been researching things on the internet. I unfortunately don't have any of my photos of my grandmother from the time to see what exactly she would have worn. Might be interesting to remake one of her dresses at some stage. But I have started to get a few ideas of what I would like to wear. My main inspiration, I think, for this one is going to come from this photo that I found online. I really love that neckline. I love that waistline, the raised waist, but still with the belt on it. A little bit of a puff sleeve, and even this little, I don't know, do you call it a plastron? This little sort of under bit there that fills in the very low V-neck, something like that. I might even have to make a little brooch of some description to go there. So I think this photo is going to be my main inspiration. I've also got this lovely picture, very similar style, slightly different neckline. If I find drafting this sort of shawl collar too much, I might end up coming back to this. Again, this has that pointed waistline, whereas this is a curved, but very similar style. However, I'm not completely convinced by the sort of little puff sleeve that you have on this. I did find another dress which I rather liked. This was an old pattern again from the 30s, and I think this would have been quite nice if I could have got my hands onto this pattern, but I can't, so I won't be. But there are things about this that I love. That, again, this is like a shawly collar, more like a scarf that's been gathered in for the collar, quite like that, or just this plainer one with a slight crossover and the slightly raised neckline. I do rather like that. But I'm thinking what I could do is maybe take more of the sleeve from this one. This has got the slightly fluffed 3/4 sleeve, or if I'm feeling really adventurous, this little tulip sort of shorter sleeve is quite interesting, but I'm not really sure how to make that. My not being sure almost makes me want to give it a go, but I think that's maybe a step beyond my pattern drafting skills at the moment. So I might start with this sleeve, see how it goes, and if I start getting adventurous during my mock-up, I might even give one of those sleeves a go and see what I can do. But certainly this sort of length of skirt, this is possibly bias cut. I'm still not completely sure whether I'll do bias cut or just rely on the rayon to give it a beautiful drape. I think I'll go the sort of fabric belt of this one rather than the gathered. This would probably be tied behind. But I do like a lot of these have this, oh, I don't know if you can see it on there. It's almost like a smocking kind of gathered arrangement up the top there. Now, I'm not sure I'll do a decorative smocking, but I might do a few rows of gathering or something and make that a little bit of a detail. With the pattern fabric I'm planning to use, you wouldn't really see that detail too clearly, but you know, I think it would be just a little bit of something nice, not just to gather it, but to do a bit of interesting gathering at the top there. In actual fact, I think all three photos that I'm using for inspiration have that kind of a feel. So that is pretty much what I'm planning to do. Now, I have nothing like those dresses in my pattern stash, so this will be a drafting pretty much from scratch. Well, not completely from scratch. What I do have is my Vogue fitting shell pattern, and this is really great if you plan to work with patterns and you do need to adapt them to get them to fit. I have been pretty lucky in that I've only ever needed to do minimal refitting of commercial patterns, but I thought in picking this up it gives me a really useful starting point for doing pattern drafting. So what I have done is I have fitted this, well, no, I haven't. I have drawn this up to my measurements, made whatever adjustments to this I think I need. Now, I should have actually made a proper fitting shell for myself and made sure I've done it right, but I'm fairly confident that this is right, so I haven't done that. So what I have done is I've taken that fitting shell now with my adjustments on it, and I have drawn them all up onto nice card, and you can see, possibly with the light coming behind, that I've even punched holes for all the details as well. So I can use this multiple times to basically start drafting my patterns. And this should be quite a useful thing. The really good thing about this is I am a larger cup size than the dresses are made to, so I've drafted this, or I've made this to the D cup fitting, which works a lot better for me than the standard. So yeah, this will be my starting point, which means I'm not only going to have to draft that raised waist, separate it out, work out where all the gathering goes, but one thing I'm really unsure about, because I've never tried this before, is to draft the collar that is going to go on there. So that's going to be an interesting thing to try as well. This will definitely need a mock-up before I get to my proper fabric, which is, if I can turn you around, this lovely burgundy rayon. So that lovely burgundy rayon will be what I'm making this out of. But it was a clearance rayon. I can't get any more if I stuff it up. So this will definitely be doing a calico mock-up, see how it goes, and if I get adventurous, I might even try this sort of tulip sleeve, otherwise 3/4 sleeve. But let's see how it goes. Okay, let me try and show you a bit of how I went about the drafting process. It's fairly long and involved, but what I have done, I showed you the basic shell sloper that I've done. I traced that out onto the paper, and first thing I do is take out the fullness from the darts. So I've joined it up there, and I joined it up from the middle. I shaped the midriff front and cut that out first to take that out the way. And then the rest of the fullness from those two darts I distributed, some between here to be gathered at the bottom, the rest to be distributed with the shirring. Now the bit I found hardest was probably working out this collar. So that's the original neckline. I'll post the instructions for doing the collar on my blog, but basically you have to find this roll line, that's where the collar will roll, and then the instructions basically tell you how to work all of this out. Now the instructions didn't quite work for me. I found after doing the draft I had to add this little bit of extra, and you'll see that when it comes to the calico version of it. And I guess this is why you always do the mock-up in a really cheap fabric, especially if you're all in doubt of how it works. Right, so here we have the finished mock-up, and I am really, really impressed with how this has turned out. I was really unsure about my sort of dart manipulation and skills in doing that sort of thing, and I was definitely unsure about even doing this tulip sleeve and having it turn out something like that. But surprisingly, once I was working on it and sat there and thought through how it might work, it was really not that tricky. What I did discover, and if I turn her around, was that this was really too full. I would have to take some fullness out if I were to do that sleeve, but I'm not going to. I think given the overall line and shape of this dress, I do much prefer the 3/4 sleeve with this. So that is what I'm going to go with. The only major change I need to make is with this collar. So if I turn her around again, while I went with the suggested measurements from the Simply Dressmaking book, I found that this collar not only needed extra width that way, but it was really far too tight across here. So I've just unpicked that centre back seam and added the triangle to get an idea of how much extra that needed. And so now I can, when I take this off, just measure that new line there and where the centre seam will now be when it comes to doing that pattern. I'm going to keep these darts in here, but I will elongate them a bit more with a softer fabric. They'll sit fine as well. And when it's on me, the shoulder seems to sit in just the right place. So really that does all seem to work. So I think I am good to go. Now, as I do this, I will need to cut myself a facing to sit behind here. The other thing I want to think about is how I'm going to deal with the gather up here. I had half a mind I might even try smocking it. I'm not sure if smocking will work. I've never done smocking before. So I'm a bit unsure of that. So I might try a few different things before I actually put this together. The other thing I need to think about is the closure. Now for my mock-up, I gave it a side closure and I was thinking I could put a side zip in there, but I really don't like side zips. What I did think, looking at the picture again, is it almost looked like it joined here. And while I couldn't see buttons, it's possible they used a zip down the front and I could do that, but I'm thinking I might do covered buttons and loops at the front. I much prefer a front closure. It gives a little bit more detail. It emphasises this line through here, which I rather like as well. So I think that's probably the way I'm going to go for the closure as well. So I will just have to think about that then. It means I'll have a seam in the centre front as well, and I might have to come up with some sort of placket arrangement. I'll probably only take the buttons down to there. I won't keep the whole front opened and buttoned. Yeah, so that's where I'm at, and I am really quite excited about how this is coming together. I'm having lots of fun doing the pattern drafting. So I won't show you all of my sewing routines, but I thought it worth taking you through a French seam. You can see me here doing the first round on the seam. It's wrong sides together. That's the most important thing to remember. And do a really thin seam, only about 1/2 centimetre here. Once you've done that, trim it down even a little bit closer so that it's nice and even, because this is the edge that's going to get trapped in the seam. Your best bet then is to turn it so the right sides are together now. And this is where you would expect them to be sewing it. But iron down that seam you've just made. It'll make the next step of sewing the actual seam so much easier. So iron that together, and then now with right sides together, sew your final seam on the stitching line. For me that meant it was about just under 1 centimetre in width to sew that second seam. Of course I need that obligatory hand sewing in all of this as well. It is just so calming to do the hand stitching. One of the finishing off things I thought was, well, buttons. Laurie loved my covered buttons that I was using here. As you can see, she is well into helping me do my buttons. And face it, where would a video be without a lorikeet?
At the end of the first dance, Captain Tilney came towards them again, and much to Catherine's dissatisfaction, pulled his brother away. They retired whispering together, and though her delicate sensibility did not take immediate alarm and lay it down as fact that Captain Tilney must have heard some malevolent misrepresentation of her, which he now hastened to communicate to his brother, in the hope
Okay, so she is now mostly done. Actually, if I take you over here, as you can see, I've got all of these buttons on. Yes, thank you, Laurie. And it's just waiting then on the hems and the bottom to hang a little bit. But there is one more thing before I do the hems. Yes, Laurie. She's just got to check everything out. Come on, let go. Look, let go of one side or the other, huh? You gonna stay there? Okay, behave yourself. Okay, the other thing to think about while I wait for the hems to drop, is this little panel, modesty panel here. I don't know, would you call it a plastron or whatever? I was half thinking that, here we go, I'll talk to you. I was half thinking that with the leftover fabric, I could make like a little camisole top, similar to the black one that I've done. But I've got a good 2 meters of fabric. It's more than I need for a camisole top, and it could well be, oh, thanks Laurie, it could well be enough for a nice little shirt, a short sleeve shirt for summer. So I think I will save that fabric for that. So if I don't do a camisole, what I could do is just cut out a little triangle that can sit under there. Now, the problem that I didn't think through is that now that I have the join at the front there, I can't just sew this to it. So what I will have to do is think about some closure, or even indeed whether I just make this removable. So maybe put some hooks and bars in, or press studs even, on the back facing there and on this, so that this can be put on, taken off, opened up for when I take it on and off. So I have basically the size of triangle I will need to cut out, and then once I've got that done, I will think about what closure and attachment I will use for this. And here is the finished plastron. Now I would show you, but as you can see, Laurie, well, she rather liked it. So maybe I will just have to show it to you when it is on the finished dress. So here is my 1930s dress, all finished up, even after a few wash and wears. It is really comfortable. This rayon wears really nicely. I do it on a gentle wash. As you can see, this is the plastron that I made here. I've used just 3 press studs, one down there, one there, one up there, which makes it easy to do. You can see the facing, and this waistband is lined all the way around, which finishes off the inside of the dress beautifully. The collar sits really, really nicely when it's on, and I just love little details like properly covered buttons with the loops. Just little details like the top stitching, the not too full skirt with just a simple rolled hem. French seams finish it off really beautifully inside. This little simple silver brooch that Mum gave me for my wedding. It was probably meant to be my something borrowed, but she decided she didn't want it back. And I love wearing it with this dress. It's got that beautiful vintage look that goes with it. Another detail to the dress that I absolutely love is the self fabric belts that you see in the 30s. So of course I had to do one. I found a lovely Diamante belt buckle, which just picks up really beautifully when I wear this belt with it. And as an added bonus, even after I made a top out of the remainder of the fabric, I had enough left to make a simple camisole. Made that all by hand on the train in the space of a few days, which makes a really great use of leftover fabrics as well. So I have the choice of wearing the camisole underneath or just using this little plastron. And I am really happy with this and always get comments when I'm wearing it. And here is the finished dress in all her glory. This has to be one of my favourites so far. So anyway, thank you for joining me on Yesterday Today Sewing. Tune in again for lots of other exciting vintage and retro looks that I plan to sew up and add to my wardrobe. Thanks for watching and see you soon.